Hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to another Wamen Hour, and we are celebrating this week International Wamen's Day with Havenwards. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to be celebrating Wamen on Wamen's Day.
You know, I think that I was thinking today, I think Wamen has kind of played itself out as a meme, but I really do think that it still has some potential that we need to continue wringing out of it. What Lauren McIntyre is so good at doing, which is just constantly repeating memes, like make them shorter, make them better, and just keep repeating it until everyone's bored of hearing it, because it's so much more impactful than making complex, accurate statements. Is just having a one-panel comic that is infinitely shareable. And the word Wamen, I feel like, in a single word, just conveys a certain amount of contempt for not contempt for women, but contempt for like feminism. Like the whole idea of like, it's Women's Day, like I love women. You just say Wamen instead of women. You've already, without having to say anything, you're kind of making fun of it.
Yeah, so, exactly.
That's what I kind of that's what I'm aiming to achieve. And if there's a better way to do it, we did talk about changing the title of the show to Wife Hour, which I think I like it, but it does kind of sound a little bit too preachy, like not quite as fun. Like Wife Hour just sounds a bit like we're having like a class about how to be faithful.
It does
to
a little bit.
To live a godly life or something boring like that.
And it's terribly uninclusive because I'm technically a civil partner, but
really, I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah, for various entertaining reasons, we didn't get married. We had a civil partnership instead, which actually, given the kind of faith journey or exploration that my partner and I are going on, feels a bit more comfortable, to be honest, now than a marriage would have been.
Yeah, I know a couple who went through the opposite thing, where they turned up to the registry office expecting to have a civil partnership because they were doing some kind of post-modern post-marriage, like a man and a woman, they wanted to get married, they wanted to be a union, but they didn't have any respect for the institution of marriage, so they wanted to call it a civil partnership. You know, there was like BBC News stories of people who were doing this at the time, but they turned up, but just because they were a man and a woman, the registry office just put them down for a marriage, and they and they were like, you know what, we're here, we dressed up, we got all our guests, let's just have a just get married at 10.
We had the flip side of that, which is we turned up to do the kind of registration and realized that various complicated legal things had got in the way, so we had to then go back and come back another day. And
how disappointing.
It was a bit frustrating at the time, but actually kind of worked out fine in the end. But yeah, so technically I don't have a wife, I have a civil partner.
All right, well, maybe when a few more of the panelists are properly hitched, legally wed, we'll have a wife hour, or we'll make it like an occasional name change. But before we get into the main topic, which you've so generously prepared for us, you've got a proper corporate presentation on the topic of
I really have
corporate wokeness, which I'm really looking forward to. But we do have a few sort of tidbits of news that have trickled in the advent of International Wamen Day. I've got, just really briefly, I've got a new gap, a new gender gap, not the pay gap, but the pension gap. So as a result of, I guess, years worked and earnings, men obviously have a higher pension built up at the end of their working years. They usually retire later as well.
Yeah.
At the point of retirement, they apparently retire with over £100,000 more than sorry, I was just trying to read this, figuring out what I was looking at. Today, women retire with £123,000 less than men. So that's just the first, I always like to document the first time I've heard a new meme. And the pay gap meme has been sort of driven so hard into the ground that it was kind of refreshing to see it turn up again in its own a new form.
I was going to say, it's like a reincarnation. It's found a new life.
Scottish Widows, I can't really fault them because that logo, I've closed it now, but I love her, the big black cape with the red lining, like she's a kind of, some kind of sorceress.
She's incredibly elegant. She reminds me, the woman that they normally get playing her in the adverts reminds me of, this is going to be very, not esoteric, but slightly highly specific. There's a Hardy adaptation, a TV adaptation of The Mayor of Casterbridge. And there's a character in that who's this kind of femme fatale who sort of steals the main sort of love interest from our heroine. And the Scottish Widow's Woman always reminds me of her. So every time I see her, I'm like, oh, you thieving bitch. Sorry.
She's got a very dark feminine. You know, I've been looking at these videos on YouTube, but we should talk about it sometime, because there's been a trend of people making videos about femininity, not even specifically from a political standpoint or an anti-feminist thing, but just reclaiming femininity as something to aspire to. And then there's also this subgenre of people on YouTube telling you how to be a dark feminine, trying to be that femme fatale kind of archetype. Yeah, but more Wamen news. We've got Hersheys, the American disgusting chocolate that tastes like sick.
That tastes so bad.
Look, I'm going to accept these cookies like the good old slave to my attention that I am. I'm not going to play the video, but notable that they not all of the women they're using in this hashtag her for she, kind of a clever wordplay. Give credit where credit is due. Hershey's chocolate hashtag her for she, women for women campaign, and not all of the women who are shown here were born as women.
I wonder if anyone can guess which one in particular, because she passes so well.
I won't play the video. I don't know what the implications are, but we've got these sort of bios of women with this delicious chocolate colored little text box next to each of them. This one says, you know, one of these things is not like the others. I don't want to spend too long on this, but just because it was in the news, I thought I'd mention it. And then as a consequence of this, I had it on the screen just a second ago, but as a consequence of that, we had someone I'm not really familiar with, apparently on the Daily Wire, has launched a rival campaign for what is it, I have to remember the exact wording that he said. There we go. Some chocolate companies don't even know what a woman is, but we do. Indulge in the chocolate binary, one with nuts, one without. You know which is which. We've got she, her, nutless, and he, him, nuts. But they have written it on the wrapper as if to suggest that it's not that obvious. So I think that's a bit confusing in terms of the campaign. They should just have the she, her, and the he, him chocolate, and then one of them's nutless. You tell which, can you tell which one?
They haven't quite thought it through. One thing I found interesting is Faye Johnston, who is the trans woman in that advert. Part of the reason that it's really pissed off a lot of radical feminists is because Faye Johnston was invited to speak to, what's it called, Durham College in North Oshawa, Ontario, as part of the school's National Day of Remembrance ceremony, marking the anniversary of a massacre that left 14 women dead. And they were murdered by, the women in question, I believe, were murdered by, it's a memory of the École Polytechnique massacre, where a man identifying as anti-feminist targeted female students for slaughter. And Faye Johnston was the woman invited to speak at another college's kind of National Day of Remembrance ceremony to kind of memorialize the murder of these women. And it was just, I think a lot of radical feminists see it as a major insult that, essentially a dude came and was like, let me tell you how hard it is to be a trans woman in this world, on an event for a misogynist slaughter.
Yeah, so, I think sort of a bad job all around. I was just thank you for that tidbit. I was not aware, so thanks for that. I'm weirdly enmeshed in TERF Twitter, so I was just trying to assess exactly how overpriced this chocolate is. So for $25, you can get a 4-pack.
Jesus.
And they look like they're quite thin. I mean, obviously, it's a political chocolate. You're not really buying it for the chocolate, but I do feel a little bit insulted that it's. Wait, is she the woman I keep seeing on YouTube advertising this? I think it might be. I'm not going to. I don't want to risk getting.
Oh, it's this guy. He did. He did the thing in response to. Was it Gillette?
Oh, really?
Yeah. He.
Oh, that's what you're looking at. products down here.
Yeah, so he
shut up and shave.
It was in response to like one of the shaving brands getting super preachy and doing a thing about like
I remember Gillette,
a dad teaching his trans son, so a FTM, to shave, and the whole like Gillette the best man can get, let's not be sexist. And this guy was just like, sod it, have the most based, like pro-masculine, like men's rights shaving brand. And I was like, I wish I had a beard because I would buy his razors.
Razors of people who hate women.
It me.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious there because I keep getting this this woman recommended. I think it's her. I didn't know she was the Daily Wire. Maybe she's not. Anyway, I can't tell. Don't care. I've lost interest. On to the next thing.
Bored now.
Yeah, he's called Jeremy. And the last thing was something that you sent me from LinkedIn, which is a list of. I'm not sharing it, am I? Let me just
not yet.
Fix that. Would you like to tell me exactly what in what context you saw it while I'm just trying to get it up?
So I have started using LinkedIn more regularly for sort of professional purposes, and just noticing the kinds of things that a lot of my colleagues or former colleagues like. And this was one of the ones that popped up that like lots of my people in my network were reacting to. And I just saw it, and it made me roll my eyes kind of inside out. Oh,
I'm doing my best to kind of fit it to the screen.
There we go.
Bear with me. we'll get there.
But it was it kind of resonated because I've one of the things we're doing at work the last couple of weeks has been helping our senior leaders do some videos for International Women's Day, and it was just a lot of the biggest barriers that some of these women face. They were talking about like the barriers to their career and to their kind of progression, and the main thing they could all think of was, I didn't really believe in myself enough, so I was a bit hesitant about taking promotions, but then I did, and it was great. And then my, kids never saw me at bedtime. And I was like sat there helping them record, being like, I hate you all. Just listening to these women in my business, just talking about like so much of it was like, this is all in your head. The barriers are in your head. This isn't like, they were all talking about how the number of like male leaders and managers they'd had kind of pushed them forward for promotion or encouraged them and helped them get to where they were. And they were like, it's so important for women to support other women. And I was like, you're literally talking about men going out of their way to help you advance. Like, yeah. So see, this was kind of, that was in the back of my mind with this whole kind of like pandering. And then when this cropped up and it was like, oh, just how awful International Women's Day is. It's just so kind of see-through and transparently kind of organizations just profiting off women's extra labor. And I was like, the only people doing this are women. Like, women are the ones organizing these events. Women are the one booking other female speakers. And I'll get into that a bit later in our main topic as to kind of partly why that is. And it was just like, so much like, pay your women speakers. I was like, yeah, they do. I've not seen anything pink related to International Women's Day for a long time. Also, like, the thing that really made me sort of pay attention to this post was the refrain from asking either of these questions. Is this really a problem? And what about men?
What about men?
Both of those are really valid questions for a lot of the stuff that comes up at International Women's Day, because so many of the things I've seen are about, like, a lot of the things this year have been about, like, the power of self-belief. And I'm like, is it really a problem if you, like, maybe the reason
you're doing it to yourself?
Yeah, it's like, actually, this isn't a structural thing. This is a you thing. Or sometimes, what about men is a valid question.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, so many social ills come down to the denial of like biological causes for anything. So the fact that women doubt themselves, allegedly, or they doubt their own abilities, or don't put themselves up for promotion because they don't think they're ready for it. These are all systemic because they, it's like stereotypes and systemical systems of oppression, all of that. I think that's where they're coming from, where like they just like nothing can be women's fault, so obviously it has to be the system's fault. But should we just read through these real quick? Some of them are a bit overlong, but yeah, this was about International Women's Day, a sort of a passive aggressive, maybe not so passive list of instructions on handy tips to to organize a International Women's Day event in your workplace. Oh, here we go. I just have to do that this whole time, and it would have been perfect.
Magic.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try and. All right. Pay women speakers and pay them the same amount as your like the maximum you've ever paid a top male consultant. Don't make anything. Go on.
The thing of benchmark their rate around that, and if you're asking women who already work for you to organise this event, pay them overtime. This is the thing. It's not so.
Get them to do it on their work time. Yeah.
Secrets of Internal Communications. The people organising this will be your internal comms team and your diversity and inclusion team, who are predominantly women, and this will be part of their day job. So they don't deserve overtime for doing their damn jobs. This is part of their job.
Yeah, I think
and it's part of my job, unfortunately, for my sins.
I should say that the way that this whole conversation came about is because the company I work at, I have to be careful about how much I say, but they do want to celebrate International Women's Day and use it as a kind of marketing opportunity. And I have this sort of open question that I'm going to try and answer by the end of the stream of, like, should I participate in this, in this day, and how should I participate in a way that maximally enforces my own worldview and tries to, subvert whatever they're trying to do as much as possible. Or conversely, should I just try to be mercenary about it and try to, get paid extra and get more coffee and cake and prestige for myself by selling out my own principles. So we'll see what I land on by the end of this. And what my conscience tells me to do after we've really looked at this. But
I mean, it depends what the cake on offer is, frankly.
Don't make anything pink. Who does that? Really, like, I don't think anyone's been tone deaf enough to use pink for International Women's Day
for a long time.
Are they still using pink for the breast cancer awareness though? I
think so. I kind of hope so.
It's good branding.
Yeah. It's a memorable colour. It's a feminine colour. Although obviously at the 20th century, pink used to be for boys, yada, 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 that old talking point, but sod it.
Yeah, pink looks good on blondes, but I don't really wear it because, I don't know, I just feel like it's too loud. Like it's just like I'm holding up a big sign that says, I'm a woman. I don't know.
I know what you mean.
At any panel event, refrain from asking either of these questions. Is this really a problem? What about men? Yeah, I think that's often the questions that spring to my mind.
And they're often valid questions.
Yeah. If you're planning an event in the evening, provide on-site childcare or pay babysitting fees. I love this. Benchmark the latter, the babysitting fees, around the top male consultant's day rate. Like what you would pay your top male consultant during the day, that's your babysitting fees now. Like whatever.
That's like, for context, from some of the consultants I've worked with, that's like minimum 500
an hour or a day.
A day.
Okay.
Minimum 500 a day. Absolutely. And if you've got like
I think 500 a day is what it's like. That's less than like one of the technicians that where I work.
I'm just that's a lot for 3 hours babysitting.
Check your organization's pay gap. Oh, for goodness sake. They cancel every event you had planned and do the work on the inside first. Pay gap app is patrol. I don't know if that's
that's a Twitter bot that basically any organization, it's probably worth looking out for next I think it's next Wednesday, on Twitter, the pay gap app. Any business that talks about International Women's Day, if you tag pay gap app and in the thread, they will then look up publicly available stats related to that company and publish like, oh, this organization's gender pay gap is whatever, which is
it's a good dunk, is it?
Yeah, apart from the fact that it's like, guys, you are economically illiterate.
Yeah, basically, the classic examples. I don't know. We really shouldn't spend any more breath debunking the pay gap. But basically, what it comes down to is if you do this to Tesco, for instance, you'll find that that women tend to work more on the tills than they do in the warehouse, and the warehouse staff get paid more because it's a more difficult job and you need like a forklift license and stuff like that. And that's, even if you control for working hours, you'll still get a gap for reasons like that. And I think this point is just saying that if you have a pay gap at all, you have no right to celebrate International Women's Day because you're a hypocrite.
Exactly. Shocking.
If you are planning to take lots of photographs of your staff posing for the annual hashtag, make sure they at least get to dress up like an 80s pop band. I don't get this one. No. She's saying the women want to dress up as 80s pop bands. I didn't get it.
I think she's trying to be fun and quirky, which hasn't really lasted. The other thing worth looking out for this year is the theme of International Women's Day is something to do with like embrace something. So you'll see lots of pictures of top executives hugging themselves, which is going to be absolutely beautiful. So look out for that. I kind of hope to see it all over my LinkedIn because it's going to make me crack up.
Yeah, that is dumb. That's what I'm saying about subverting. Like, maybe one way to do this is just like suggest doing the most ridiculous thing possible so that everyone participating in it looks stupid.
I have some ideas.
Okay. We'll get to those. A social media slogan about appreciating all the women who slog for you doesn't cut it. If you want to recognize the female talent in your organization, either give them all a day off, paid, or ask all the men in your organization to leave early for the school pickup.
What if the men don't have children? Are they just going to send them out to local primary schools and grab a child?
Someone else's kid.
Just go, run, grab the nearest kid and leg it.
Love it. Avoid suggesting that equality will make for a softer, gentler workplace. More hugs at the end of difficult meetings, etc. Women aren't naturally empathetic. Mostly, and especially now, they're very pissed off. Ignore this point at your peril.
Women are
this is where like passive aggressive just becomes aggressive.
It really does. I mean, apart from this woman, women are naturally more empathetic than men. Yeah. I would say. Like, I
mean, not that I'm advocating for a softer, gentler workplace either. Like,
I don't necessarily want to hug at the end of a meeting, but at the same time, I would say it should. Why is it a point of pride to say women are just as harsh and unpleasant as men? Not that men are harsh and unpleasant. It's like
I did once, for context, I did once after a difficult meeting at one point in my career, probably during a certain softer, gentler part of my menstrual cycle, I did go to a bathroom and cry after a meeting I was in. Not because anyone was being mean to me or because they had a microaggression or something, but just because there's the sheer stress of the situation and the decisions that were being made were so like difficult, and I really felt like it wasn't going to go well. It was a really bad meeting, basically. That's what happens to women in the workplace. It's it's very empowering.
It's like I once got a hug from my boss because I'd just returned from long-term sick leave that I'd had to go on kind of as an emergency, and like she hadn't seen me for about 3 months, and I came back in and she was she immediately apologized for like overstepping boundaries, and that was like the only time a colleague has ever kind of made physical contact. Because anyway, I don't know why I've gone off on that one, but it's like
that says me like no one wants a hug in a meeting. Like that's a big straw man. I don't think anyone was advocating for that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that film Baby Boom? Oops.
No.
There's a film I watched it a few months ago with my husband. It's about it's like an 80s movie about a yuppie like high power businesswoman. She's married to Egon from Ghostbusters, and I think she's a lawyer, and she inherits this child who has become an orphan, and she's like the next in kin to take care of this child, and it's a very fish out of water, like, oh, this woman is not motherly at all. And the messaging of the film was really confused by the end, where she ends up, it's almost like based in that she ends up enjoying being the mother to this child more than she enjoyed her corporate job. But then they also it was like the film almost like caught itself saying that and wanted to go, oh no, actually the corporate job was too hard anyway, like nobody should have to work this hard, like these long hours and high stress. Like this is just a bad job, not just for women but for everyone. Quite an old film to watch.
They suddenly realized they were saying something they didn't quite intend to and had to quickly rewrite.
Yeah, so they wanted that feel-good ending where she gets the best of both worlds, but you know that she can't go back to that, like, you know, those ridiculous hours, like working that highly stressful job, because that would not be a good ending. So anyway, we're almost done here and we'll go into a presentation. Have a look at last year's proclamations about improving female representation at the top on the board in middle management on your R&D teams. If these airy claims have not been met, I refer you to point 5, cancel your IWD 2023. That's always an option.
I mean, from an internal comms perspective, that's a fairish point, in that the idea is that you should always kind of try and close the loop. So if you've made a promise, try and fulfill it, because otherwise you look untrustworthy. But at the same time, it's like
no one ever does. So.
Yeah, no one ever does. No one actually does internal comms correctly.
Yeah, you'd have to like fire all the women who have children in order to fit these gaps. Or exactly. As you've said before, you'd have to you know, maybe make some new women out of a few of the like well-paid men. Just encourage them to tick a different box next year.
Yeah, just look around your boardroom and go, all right, Steve, I'm sorry, you're now Stephanie. And then, you know, lower down, just find a couple of women and encourage them to transition, just to kind of lower the pay rate for men. It'll balance out.
Yeah, no, double your effect by having it go both ways.
Yeah,
and exactly. You know, it's very it's not very forward thinking of you to forget that you don't even need to change your name. You don't even need to change anything about yourself. You literally just need to start you should change your pronouns. You don't even have to go for she, her. You can just go with the they, them if you don't
exactly
you don't like it, and just start identifying that way, and you'll help your company out. You'll probably get a good promotion out of it.
And if anyone's particularly bored, look up Philip and/or Pippa Bunce, who found his or her own way around the problem.
I will have to do that. Yeah,
he's a cross-dressing banker who was nominated for like one of the most influential women in finance, when 4 days of the week he goes in men's clothes and 1 day of the week he goes in drag. As Pippa.
Nice. That's how you win.
That's how you exactly.
If at any point on International Women's Day you find yourself thinking, why am I doing this? Congratulations, you have finally stumbled on the essential rule of International Women's Day. Don't do anything without first asking the women you take for granted 364 days a year what they might want instead. I mean, that's actually good advice. Like, instead of just pandering to marketing and, you know, your LinkedIn page and what you think would be cool, like maybe just like talk to your employees and see what they want to do.
I'll explain why that doesn't happen.
Do not on any account host any International Women's Day training courses for women on how they can be confident like men, learn to ask for better pay raise like men, or memorize handy tips to get that promotion that keeps going to their male colleague, or you'll have me to deal with.
I mean, the thing with that is, like, one of the golden rules I remember hearing very early on in my career was that, and I don't know if there's any actual data to back this up, but it's the thing of women apparently won't consider themselves qualified for a job unless they feel they meet 95% of the criteria, whereas men will think it's worth a shot if they meet maybe sort of 60 to 75% of it. And once I heard that, I thought, sod it, I will take a risk and apply for more jobs. And hey presto, I actually got quite a lot further in my career. So it's almost like actually taking advice on act like a dude in the workplace, which is primarily, or certainly originally was, more of a dude's sphere. Maybe that helps. Just saying. Have
you ever heard the Peter principle?
No, I don't think so.
It's a principle that you continue to get promoted up until your level of incompetence. So if you're good at the job you're currently doing, you'll be promoted to a job you don't know how to do. But if you are, you know, quick on your feet and you're smart enough to get to grips with that job, you'll then be promoted again. So you're now, you know, another fish out of water. And one day you'll be promoted and you'll be terrible at this new job that you've got, and it won't matter because, like, what are they going to fire you? Like, you're obviously good. Like, you've got years of competent, like, history at this company or whatever it is, and you'll just stay there doing your job badly because you were good at doing your last job, but this job is, like, not good enough to get you promoted, but you're not doing badly enough to get fired. So
I see you've met the civil service.
I first heard about this in reference to The Office, that TV show Women Love.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's kind of implied in The Office that Michael Scott, in the American one, I think it maybe even applied more subtly in the English one, that the manager is terrible to the point you've got to ask, like, why does he have this job? Like, he's so bad at being a manager. But you realize he got that job because he was good at sales, and you only get that impression when you get to see Michael Scott or David Brent actually doing the sales stuff, and they actually have a good rapport with customers and they're good at making sales, which is how they got the job of manager, but they're terrible at that.
Yeah.
So that was a bit off topic. We're almost at the end here. Don't be like men. I mean, I think that's good advice. Don't teach women how to be like men. If you want them to be good at their jobs, then you might accidentally teach them to be more masculine if that's the kind of work they're in.
Yeah.
Incidentally, that might happen. Make sure your contractual fine print agrees to full payment of any women you've hired in the event of last-minute cancellation when you realize you've bitten off more than you can chew. I guess that's like some kind of snarky event organizer thing. I don't really get that one.
Yeah, I think it's referring to, like, if you suddenly realize that you're just fabulous.
Would you like to read the quote or leave it off the screen?
So, to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. Particularly, I've added this, if your enemy works in internal communications. So think of me for the next 20 minutes or so as the Sun Tzu of internal communications. Next slide, please. I'm going to essentially teach you, my lovely audience, Poe's lovely audience, a kind of plan of attack, ways that you can subvert your internal comms, ways that you can kind of fight back against some of the wokery in any organization you're in. So we'll start with kind of knowing your enemy, who are internal comms, what is internal communications, and what that goal of subverting woke employers looks like. We'll cover why the most common approach to subversion or pushing back against wokery in the workplace is often doomed to fail and what that looks like, and what you should do instead. And then I'll end with a special bonus mission for anyone like Poe in the audience who has any potential diversity points available to play with. So next slide, please. So this quote is from the Government Communications Service definition of internal comms. So the purpose of internal communications, it says, is to inform and engage employees in a way that motivates staff to maximize their performance and deliver the business strategy most effectively. It's probably worth me briefly explaining what I mean when I say internal comms.
It's a bit of word salad.
It is a bit. It's very government comms service. Internal comms is essentially the reason that when you check your email inbox, it's flooded with emails about this or that awareness day, invitations to all staff events and leadership town halls. IC teams are in charge of your internal channels like your intranet, workplace social media, and events and that kind of thing. So how do you survive that flood of kind of woke and unnecessary, perhaps, communications, and where is it all coming from? Well, it's coming from two directions. It's coming from senior leaders, HR, and other kind of stakeholders who are all pushing this agenda. They want to talk about it within their organizations. And they'll be working with their internal comms teams to push it out. But internal comms is also one of those jobs that's largely quite easy to do, which means that internal comms teams are made up of millennial women with humanities degrees, women like myself, essentially the regime's natural enforcers. So at its basic level, and its sort of purest form, internal comms should just be about keeping employees informed and giving them the tools and information they need to do their day job. But because internal comms pros want to find stuff to fill their days, prove their value, and make them look good to their stakeholders, there's an awful lot of kind of mission creep as the kind of work expands. And the other thing is that because a lot of IC team members are sort of millennial women, very kind of leftist, they feel that their role is to try and help make social change happen at work. Their goal is to try and change the political slant of their workplace and make it more woke and more left-leaning. which is why your email inbox, your work intranet, and all that kind of thing are all utterly clogged up with this woke, pointless political crap that has nothing to do with what you're actually there to do in your day job. So what are people in the sensible centre to do about it? How do you debunk the woke idiots and take down the regime in your workplace? Next slide.
Oh, I know this one. I'm going to shove red pills down their throats. Right?
This is the thing, is that first you need to know what matters to your internal comms team. And I will explain why shoving red pills down their throats won't really help, alas.
No. It's like a cat. You've got to massage their neck while it goes down. So they'll swallow it.
That's one approach. Because the first thing to know is that comms budgets are incredibly stretched. So although internal comms is important, it's always the first on the chopping block if kind of budget needs to be found elsewhere, which means that internal communicators are always trying to justify their budget. So if there's a choice between a business's advertising spend or investing more money in internal comms, CEOs will pretty much always favour the external side of things, which means that internal comms teams are always pressured to prove their value and their return on investment. And it would be nice to think that they do that by having clear, effective ways of measuring their impact, smart, measurable objectives with targets and benchmarks. And luckily for us, as I said, internal comms people are largely sort of mediocre humanities grads like myself. We don't measure nuance, we just measure reach, which means we only look at how many people opened an email or read an article or came to an event. So if 4,000 people saw a blog post from your CEO, it doesn't matter whether that was 4,000 people who loved it or hated it. All that matters is some eyeballs saw it. IC teams will also look a little bit at sentiment of comments. So where you've got comments available on your intranet or sort of other like internal comms channels. And internal comms teams will look at whether people were positive about something versus how many comments were negative. But to be honest, what they're looking for is, did people react? Are there comments at all? Or is it largely just tumbleweed? Which means that because they're not very sophisticated about how they measure performance, all your IC teams are looking for is numbers to fill a very belt and braces dashboard that just says, look, people are looking at what we do. They care about what we do. They reacted to what we do. Please don't cut our budgets. Which means that because channels, essentially they're just looking for the numbers to say, look, people are looking, they're reacting. And the other thing to bear in mind is that because things like intranets are really, really expensive to procure, they're incredibly complex to set up and difficult and costly to maintain, your IC teams and senior leaders want to fill them with content, and they want people to see that content, basically to justify the amount that they will have spent, which will have been in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions. Because just having the views justifies your IC team's existence. I mean, they'd love to do the more complex measurement to be able to get into how people feel about what they're doing and whether it's actually changing anything at work. But investing the time and intellectual energy to really measure properly is never going to be at the top of the sort of priority list.
It's easier to look where the light is good and just measure, it's the tyranny of metrics.
Exactly.
It's easier to just look how many likes it got, how many reactions it got, than
exactly
reading the comments.
Yeah, they don't have this. They typically don't have the time or the sophistication, essentially, to really kind of dig into, like what the metrics mean, and they don't really. Then the thing is, in terms of comms planning, people don't really think through like, what are we trying to achieve? Why are we doing this? So they don't really measure anything that would prove that. They just go, look, loads of people have seen it. How lovely. Which brings me on to, as you said, the red pills in the next slide, which is a little bit of a black pill, perhaps, from me. Because I think the biggest mistake I've seen from a lot of sensible centrists in the various places I've worked is that they try to push back. We all make the mistake of assuming that the people we're talking to are reasonable, are rational, and that they can or will change their minds in the face of the right evidence. So, of course, if your senior leader or your chief exec publishes a blog post that you find politically objectionable, that's disgustingly woke, or that's irrelevant to the work you do, or is completely sort of hostile to your organization, you'll see lots of sensible centrists in the internal comments pointing this out. They'll say, oh, this goes against our code of ethics, or it's discriminatory against a political identity. Why are you talking about Ramadan when you've never mentioned Easter? That kind of thing. And the thing is, the people in the comments saying that and pushing back are frequently not wrong. A lot of the kind of communications effort is actually often against an organization's own internal ethical code, or it's irrelevant to the work everyone's there to do, or it is actually often discriminatory. But internal comms doesn't care. And by reacting, you're playing into their hands. Because one, obviously, the more you push back, the more you're engaging with their content. Long comment threads and discussions on internal blog posts or workplace social media help to boost engagement scores and viewing stats. Because look, our channels have a purpose. People are reading and engaging. And the other thing is that you're making the mistake of seeing internal comms teams and their HR overlords as logical. For most comms campaigns on other topics that aren't woke, if you get a hugely hostile response to a post or an article, as a professional communicator, you take a step back and do a bit of a lessons learned exercise. You can tell that I've had a lot of corporate training because I'm sounding like a corporate clone. But you step back and you go, okay, why did that go badly? What should we do differently next time? Is this topic relevant to my audience? Is it inappropriate? Why did it push those buttons? So you stop, you learn, you improve, and you decide maybe you're going to do something differently or you're not going to talk about that again because it clearly didn't work for your audience. But when your topic is anything to do with DE&I, anything woke, hostile responses are not a sign that you should stop. They're a sign that you should do more. You should do more communications on the subject. You need to do it better, and you need to do it now in order to re-educate your anti-inclusive, regressive alt-right workforce. So resistance.
Just to reinforce that, on Oren McIntyre's podcast recently, he had Curtis Yarvin on, the Moldbug himself to talk about. I don't think he's calling it the clear pill, but it used to be Curtis Yarvin's idea that when you, just like as you say, when you fight back, you're just giving them a reason to exist. They, in the podcast he did with Oren McIntyre recently, he said that all you're doing is making their day slightly more exciting and giving them the motivation to continue this battle. Like you're making this like a fun battle for them to go out and fight, where you could just be making it boring for them to be pushing at an open door. Exactly. Because you're basically, if you push back or you question or you argue, you're kind of you're giving them something to prove. You're giving them like a person whose mind they need to change and re-educate. And as you say, it is a kind of more exciting thing. And I will get on to like the contrast in a second. There's also a little bit more of a dirty secret that internal comms teams tend to not want to own up to. So if you work for a kind of big enough organization where you've got any kind of like blog channel or something like Yammer where you can comment and interact, you'll find that your workplace will have made you sign up either passively or actively to some sort of usage policy. So this is something like, you broadly agree not to be abusive, inappropriate, or unprofessional on work channels. So you'll say, yes, I agree to abide by the sort of workplace code of conduct for our online channels, which, to be honest, is fair enough. It's a workplace. You probably shouldn't be slagging off your colleagues in public. I think that's relatively reasonable, except that the rules of those policies really vary depending on your political stance. So one place I worked, and someone in the comments has said some insider info from Havenwards. Yeah, I confess I am a tool of the regime. I have a background of internal comms. And a few years ago when I worked in an internal comms position, we did a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of communications. And we had one or two regular commenters who, whenever we did blog posts on those topics, they were always very polite and dignified and respectful. But they would always question why we were pushing, Marxist political theories and woke topics in an organization that was theoretically supposed to be apolitical. And they always stuck very much within the letter and the spirit of our comments policy, that they'd signed up to. But because they were openly questioning the power structures, and because the kind of general fear was that other people probably agreed with them but weren't saying anything, we actually, as the internal communications team, were tasked with finding their line managers, reporting them, and essentially initiating disciplinary proceedings against them. So kind of acting like a Stasi of the intranet, because we couldn't risk them continuing to openly question what we were publishing. It was too sensitive. And yet on the flip side, we had various senior leaders who were LGBT allies, who were allowed to publish blog posts that literally were talking about sort of wanting to aggressively crush TERFs, because that was fine. That was an approved position. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Yeah, exactly. And it's a combination of both hierarchy within the workplace and hierarchy of political views.
Which brings me on to the next slide, which is how do you fight back when that's the context that you're working within? And this is where the slight black pill comes in that I've tried to soften with a cute little cartoon.
I like it.
Disengage completely. Just completely step away. As someone said, I'm not being paid enough to listen to HR. Fair play, that's the right attitude. Because it may feel very passive. It may feel like it'll achieve the opposite of everything that we stand for, and that you'll just be helping to accelerate the slippery slope. But here's why it works. As I said, the mechanics of internal comms are incredibly expensive. Both intranets, workplace social media are costly to set up and maintain, and they always suffer from pretty low engagement. One of the places I worked previously had nearly 100,000 employees. 100,000. On our intranet, when we published an article, if we got 1,000 views on an article, that was a bloody good day. 500 was super high. The average was about 200 views for a workplace of 100,000 digitally connected employees. That's not a good use of money to run those channels. So when we published something about DE&I, and it became a bit of a firestorm in which suddenly we were getting tens of thousands of views and hundreds of comments. As you said yourself earlier, Poe, that's a really good day to be in internal comms. That's exciting because it's happening. People are actually engaging with what you say. And even if everyone commenting was really aggressive and clearly hated it, it was like, finally people are reading. We've got a purpose. We've done something that's like hit the button. And it's actually incredibly demoralizing for your internal comms team and their HR stakeholders, where you've been working on a campaign for months and you've done your best to kind of create something that you think will actually kind of engage your audience, and realize that the only people who've actually read it are the people that you worked with on it in the first place, and maybe some of their work friends who are just having a look out of sympathy. Which means if you disengage and you don't look, you're contributing to that sense of, why are we even here, that your internal comms team will end up living with.
Yes, Scott Adams has been in the news this week, of course, and one of his favourite axioms, idioms, is persuasion. Was it attention is the first step of persuasion, or the most important part of persuasion is attention? So just don't look. That's the
absolutely. And the other part of that is because the wokery is essentially happening whether you like it or not. And so pushing back and resisting, as I kind of indicated, becomes a sign that your internal comms team need to redouble their efforts. So apathy is the only real weapon that we have. They're fighting a war for your eyeballs. They need your eyeballs and they don't care about your brain. So don't give them your eyeballs. And what I mean by that specifically is don't even open links on the internet. If you see an inflammatory headline about a topic, like it's Black History Month or it's LGBT Pride Month 322, don't click on it. No matter how tempting it is to click just to see how bad it is, don't open it. If you can set up a shortcut or a sort of homepage default so that you can get specifically to whatever page on the internet you need to get your work done, do that so you can bypass the main internet homepage, because then that'll massively decrease the amount of views and the amount of analytics they're getting of showing people kind of clicking in. And where you've got kind of all staff emails, again, set up automatic filters so that whatever topics you particularly want to avoid, whether that's, just a subset of DE&I or whether it's the whole thing, I'd recommend the whole thing, get it to set so it's deleted straight away without being opened, crucially without being opened, because then that'll add to the stats of X percentage of people didn't even bother reading this email, it just disappeared. Because all of that affects the overall stats for that campaign and that performance, which gives it a crappier and crappier return of investment. So if you've got an organization of 15,000 people and only a couple of hundred people ever open an all-staff email about whatever topic, that's a win, even if it's depressing. As I said, it feels really depressing. I want to be able to say, no, here's how you fight back and here's how you make a change. Oh, you gave away something secret. Essentially, it kind of, it demoralizes your internal comms team, especially if they brought in sort of external agencies to help run campaigns, because then you're wasting even more of their money. And the final part of that weapon, the overall weapon of apathy, is this. One of the biggest and genuine challenges for internal comms, sort of outside of the wokery stuff, it's one of the things that we struggle with a lot, is knowing that our audience are dealing with information overload. There are so many things that your internal comms team are trying to communicate about, and they're stretched thin. And they know that our audiences are apathetic, disengaged, and don't really care. We're just looking for the most relevant information for our jobs. The biggest challenge for internal comms is breaking through the noise, which means that's the kind of double whammy part here. Because one of the main markers for effective IC and whether they're doing their jobs well is whether or not employees can get the information they need to do their jobs. And that phrase is your secret weapon. So any opportunity you have to give feedback on anything, whether that's your line manager asking if you've seen the latest D&I newsletter, or whether that's an all-staff survey, and most organizations will have them, so look out for them, explain that you haven't seen any of the internal comms, or you struggle to keep up with all the different campaigns because you're dealing with information overload and it's affecting your stress levels and well-being at work. It's not that you're angry with it or you find it offensive. You just want to be able to focus on the stuff that's directly relevant to your job, and everything else is getting in the way. You can't really deal with the noise. It's information overload. It's overwhelming, because that's a clear sign to anyone looking at that data that your internal comms team are not doing well enough, because they're supposed to cut through the noise and they're supposed to make you care about the stuff, like particularly D&I, despite everything else. So if they're seeing that the stats are saying everyone's feeling more stressed, everyone's feeling like they can't deal with the amount of information coming through, that's a sign that essentially your internal comms team are failing. So
nice.
That's the, yeah. Whenever you get the chance to give feedback, say that you really struggle to get the information you need to do your job. That's essentially the phrase, because there's just too much.
You just said the password. They
all the keys of the kingdom.
So they'll leave you alone. I just want a grill.
Pretty much. So next slide. I'm just sort of summarizing what I've already said, which is essentially to win the battle, no matter the temptation. Resist the urge to wade in and explain why they're wrong, even though it's so bloody tempting. I know that we all have a kind of lot of zeal to start debunking left, right, and centre, but it won't help, and it will almost certainly embolden the people you're actually trying to demoralise. If they spend, £50,000 on a big flashy D&I campaign and it gets super low engagement, that's a huge problem when it comes to renewing budgets next year. So attack their ROI by finding ways to focus on your day job. Because the pessimistic answer to subverting workery at work is it isn't going anywhere. We can't stop it. It'll take a much bigger cultural shift for that to happen. And in order for the conditions to be right that we can actually make that kind of shift occur, we need sensible centrist people to have secure jobs and well-balanced minds. So disengaging from internal comms, much as it pains me to say it as someone for whom this was my profession, is a way to both demoralise the other side while preserving your sanity and keeping your nose clean. But on the next slide, I have a bonus mission. And bonus points for anyone who recognises who that is. If you tick the right diversity boxes, so particularly LGBT or non-white, and to a lesser extent Wamen, you could consider being a bit more actively provocative, because your workplace will likely have diversity working groups, especially LGBT and BAME ones. So if you fit the criteria, and only if you fit the criteria, so sorry straight white men, you can't help here, join those groups, and then you've got a couple of different approaches. You can either be the kind of both the most woke, but also the most cautious, consultative, and the most over-promising and under-delivery you've ever been. So, for example, if your LGBT working group's aiming to put out a guide to being a good ally at work, you can be a committee member, and your job would be to ask, have they consulted with all the LGBT staff members in your organisation? Have you found out their views? Well, if they haven't, you're happy to lead the consultation, so you'll set up a working group. Except it's really hard to schedule a working group meeting for the next 3 months, so you'll have to start in a few months' time. And then once you've done that, you really need to design the survey perfectly to make sure it's really, really good and really accurate. And then you'll need to work out who you're reaching out to and how you'll reach them. And then you'll need to look at the results, and you can't organise a meeting to look at the results for another 6 weeks. And suddenly, a piece of work that would have taken 3 committed activists 6 weeks to put together and publish has taken 6 months or more, and you haven't even started drafting it yet. So that's one approach, is to just be as helpful as possible and slow everything down. And again, this works for things like sort of neurodiversity groups or sort of disability groups. If there's anything that you particularly gets up your nose and you tick the right boxes to join that committee, have a go at being a very helpful pain in the arse. Another approach is also to kind of essentially be the wokest of the woke and indulge in black propaganda. It's a thing I'm sort of tempted to do, but not quite brave enough. So, for example, you could join a group and encourage them to promote someone that you know will cause controversy within the organization. So if anyone can join their work LGBT group, I would recommend that they suggest recommending Grace Lavery's A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Penis, which is a real title of her novel. It's not even a novel, a real title of the book that Grace Lavery wrote. You could recommend that as essential reading for Pride, because the minute people start looking at it, they're going to have some serious questions. But
they'll also have questions about you for suggesting it. So
that's true, but you're just saying you're a trans ally and you really care about hearing the voices of trans women. That's your answer.
I've got a counter proposal. For anyone who's got their wife in on it with them. What I would do is you get yourself diversity points if you don't want to be trans. You make your wife into a man. You just start referring to your wife by male pronouns, and now you're gay, right?
Perfect.
And you get you just try and make everyone else refer to her with male pronouns as well, but without changing any part of her appearance, so that it's really like jarring for everyone to participate in it, and they'll just see how stupid it is. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it's kind of a cell phone, though.
It is a little bit. I would say a few people have said by being too kind of controversial, perhaps you will draw more attention to yourself. Yeah, there is certainly a risk there, but it's something where it's like, if you want to feel like you're doing something and you can join those kinds of groups, then it's maybe worth a try. You can stick it out for a few months and see if you can at least slow them down. I would say, to be honest, it's quite hard to be too cliche for those kinds of work groups. It's too hard to be over stereotypical. They're quite useless anyway, so it won't attract too much attention. Possibly going all in and recommending the really controversial stuff might be a bad approach, but I thought I'd suggest. Yeah, I'd suggest, if someone
won't read it anyway. Is the thing.
Well, there is that. That's the other thing. Is the depressing thing is how much no one will actually care.
If they're not going to read your email, they're definitely not going to go buy that novel that you suggested.
It's very true. It's very true. But yeah, so overall, if you want to try and do something and you can tick some diversity points, then it might be worth exploring that option. But otherwise, I would say the best advice to preserve your sanity, to avoid attracting the attention of the kind of internal comms Stasi that I mentioned earlier, just ignore it, disengage, step away, and treat your work like it's a job. Like it's a 9 to 5 and it doesn't affect you the rest of the time. And if you can avoid looking at the intranet, it'll probably make it easier to pretend that the wokery isn't creeping in. So that's my advice.
In that vein, would it be good to add to the internal comms in a completely apolitical way? So for my organization, it would be issuing an internal memo about geometric tolerances or about stainless steel or something. Would that be helpful by just drowning out the woke with actually useful, slightly boring content?
Kind of. Yes, I think depending on the organization, you'd struggle to kind of create enough noise to really balance it out. A lot of the places I've worked, like the actual day job related comms, are definitely in the minority compared to the sort of agenda pushing stuff. But it could be worth trying. And if nothing else, if you decide to try and push out memos on really boring stuff that no one else cares about, if you contact your internal comms team and go, I'd love to do a blog about, something deeply technical and nitty gritty, you're taking up space, you're using their platform, and you're potentially making other people go, God, our internal comms is really dull, which means they're less likely to look at the blogs. Sorry, I'm sure that topic is more interesting than it sounds, but...
It is. Well, the thing with being a Wamen is that they might promote my stuff anyway, just because they can be woke without even having to be woke, because they're just promoting a female member of staff writing about very boring engineering topics. I say boring. I am actually interested enough in this stuff that I would write like 1,000 words about stainless steel, and I could do it every week for like a year.
It could be worth suggesting, like, genuinely there's an element where, like, on a sort of slightly more sympathetic level to internal comms teams, people are looking for content. We're looking for stuff to publish. So if someone comes along and goes, I've got a great idea, trust me, people are going to love to hear about stainless steel. They might be like, I don't think they are, but we haven't got anything else planned. So
you're saying I am boring.
I'm so sorry.
No, not you. I'm saying the how dare they say that my stainless steel blog is not interesting, that it's keeping women down.
Weirdly, one place I worked had someone who wrote blogs. He was an archivist for our organization and just wrote blogs about like weird things he'd found in the archive. And the titles he'd send in looked incredibly dull, but he was a very entertaining writer. So I was genuinely just like, this is fantastic. I'm loving this. And our team were kind of going, well, we need to really think about, suggesting he writes a bit less for us because we need more space for the diversity and inclusion stuff. And I was like, no, bugger it. This is the best stuff we publish. But I think they axed it eventually. Title. Yeah, but unfortunately he was a straight white man, so I think it got axed in the end.
Yeah, you should have convinced his wife to be trans, and then he could have been gay.
It's very true.
Like my idea.
Or convinced him. I saw someone the other day who claimed to be he claimed to have a form of blood chimerism that means that they are a multiple system and they have multiple. It wasn't like multiple personality disorder. It's literally because he has blood chimerism. He was like, there are two of us and we have two different identities. So you could even go for that without having to change your personality. Just occasionally refer to yourself in the plural.
I like it. Yeah, we, the royal we.
Exactly.
Okay. We do have super chats. We have a bidding war going on, as so often happens between DRT and Sir Garnet. So thank you to both of those gentlemen. Our English pounds donator for £15 initially. We have, with what's happened recently in El Salvador, a topic on how crime should be dealt with by society could be interesting. Is El Salvadoran or the Norwegian method preferable? Thanks for that. We'll see if it wins. I'll have to do the little maths conversion. DRT says, what actually is a good date idea? Movie, then meal is quite classic, but a treatise on this might help single dudes out there. Well, I know which of those is easier to answer.
I was going to say tips from lesbians here. Lesbian dates are the best dates.
Yeah, did you talk about your wonderful movie, your movie theater experience did you tell me that in private or on the show?
I can't remember, but the one where I turned the house turned our upstairs room into a cinema during lockdown because my wife really missed going to the cinema. That kind of thing. Yeah, me too. I remember the first film we saw out of lockdown was Joker. That was pretty good. That was a good night. Should I do that? I don't know if I should do the addition on the stream or if I'll have to spend several seconds of silently typing, so I'll figure that out later. But thanks so much to our super chatters for getting in that. They're both fighting valiantly for their topics to be given preference, so that's going to be good for the stream. And I think other than that, I've covered everything I wanted to say. Excellent.
So there's we'll decide what the next topic is going to be, either date night ideas or since they both donated so much, maybe we'll do both. For,
date night in El Salvador.
El Salvador crime, yeah.
An El Salvador crime-based date night.
Yeah, let's do. They've both been very generous gentlemen, so we'll do. We'll try to cover both in one stream, and maybe do something else. The only other thing I'll mention is that previous guest on the show, Mary Harrington, has just published her book yesterday called Feminism Against Progress, and I'm hoping that if enough people, I don't know, clap your hands and wish, and maybe we can get Mary back to talk about her book, and do buy it. If she comes back or if she doesn't, go ahead and buy the book. And read it, because I'm sure it's great. She's a great writer. So that's my plug for today. And I think that's all I've got to say. We're almost to the end of our Star Trek, the original series movies that I'm watching with my husband. So we're going to, as soon as we finish watching the 6th one, we're halfway through the 5th one now, but when we finish watching all 6, we'll do a stream about those. So that's what's coming up next on the PO Box.
Excellent.
But for Wamen Hour, that's it for another week. Thank you so much for joining us, Havenwards, and also the chat. We love you all, and have a happy International Wamen Day. Please say Wamen more. I know it's a dead meme, but it is helping, I think. I imagine it's helping.
I like to think so. And ignore your internal comms.
Just to put that, maybe you can set up a rule in your Outlook so it just goes straight to the bin.
Pretty much.
That's my suggestion.